Spirits of place. While our work tends to focus on the plant spirits and the deities of the green realm and the ancestors of land, being in right relationship with the spirits of place is crucial to not only working a good path that's informed by root animism, but also being in good relationship with the plant spirits, because the plant spirits do not live in a vacuum. When they grow in the wild especially, they are surrounded by an ecology of personhood that goes beyond just their own little group. So when we approach a stand of plants and we tend to think, oh, my relationship here is just with this plant, and especially if we're doing harvesting or we're moving, things around, but really, whatever work we do with the plant spirits affects and involves a great number of other persons who indwell and inhabit the spaces around the plants. And what we see in a lot of the folklore, specifically the fairy faith folklore, is that there are spirits of place who have their own direct relationship with the plant spirits, oftentimes in the role of guardian or protector. So, making sure that when we're moving into these places that are inhabited by the plant spirits, that we're also acknowledging the presence of many other types of non-human, other than human, more than human people, ensures that we create as little offense as possible, that we trespass as little as possible, and that we sort of have everybody on our side. It's great to be in right relationship with the plants, and especially when we're doing a plant focused work. But when we have everybody lined up, then things go a lot better. So, who are these spirits of place? First and foremost, there's a lot of different ways this can happen. First, spirits, non-corporeal beings, persons without physical bodies, can indwell places and landmarks and formations. So they are able to reside in or use a vessel as a stone or a particular land formation or even a particular place, a pond, a river, a stream, a mountain, a set of mountains. There's no real clear-cut way that this works. The only way to really understand what's happening and who's living there is by having direct personal experience of the numinous, the presence of personhood. So we have many spirits who indwell natural spaces. They either take on a natural formation as their body, so to speak, or it's a place they haunt, meaning that they go lots of different places, but they have a particular personal affinity with this area, and they come and rest there or reside there. And no matter kind of which direction it is, it's very important try not to offend or hurt, because they are the guardians of those spaces, and oftentimes they are gatekeepers who allow vital force to flow in and flow out, and they are managing the ways the seasonal tides come, and they are in relationship with the deities of the green realm, and they are in relationship with all the plants and the animals and the insects, and even the mighty dead who are interred in that land. And so as guardians of place, we need to make sure that we're always acknowledging them and respecting them and really trying to hear their guidance and walk and behave in a way that doesn't offend them, doesn't cause some problems between us and between them. So, spirits of place. We also have non-corporeal or differently corporeal beings like the Fae, the good folk, who don't necessarily indwell land formations. They don't indwell the land itself, but they live on the land sort of in the same way we do, but in a different cut of reality. So we can be coexisting with them without perceiving them. And it's possible that even they coexist with us and don't perceive us. There tends to be this assumption that they have all of these incredible superpowers and they like know more than we do. And oftentimes that's true, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes they don't know we're in a space just like we don't know they're in a space until the paths cross and something happens, right? So we have to recognize that these folk have been here longer than us. And even if that's not true, when we step into a space with that sentiment, with that mindset, it tends to help us cultivate right action, right? Better behavior. So when we come into a space, especially an uncultivated space, a wild space, we have to acknowledge that we're visiting. We're only going to be here a short time for a picnic or camping or a ritual or a hike, but that there are people, many types of people, who call this place home all the time. We are in their homes. So we have to behave like guests, and we have to make sure that whatever we bring into the space adds to the beauty and the harmony and the wellness of the space and doesn't detract from those things. And oftentimes the best way to do that is to just leave no trace, to leave the space as you found it. And of course, if you encounter trash or whatever, picking that up and taking it out with you, leave it better than you found it, is very good. And so not getting in the way of these ancient beings, these ancient races of persons who have called these spaces home since time immemorial, who live there full time, even though we're just visitors. And actually, if we really pan back on this topic and think about, let's say that you own a home, okay? Your home even is a short-term visitor. It's been there for a very short amount of time, right? It hasn't been there for long, and it probably won't be there forever. So even, these decades and decades and even centuries long inhabitations we're still in the role of guest. And the spirits of place are in the role of host. And so this is the sacred relationship, and this is the invitation to move into relationships of reciprocity, that we have to acknowledge that we are on a land, on a space that is inhabited by otherness, and to the best of our abilities behave that way. When you're in a residential situation or you're going to be somewhere for a long time, then it's very important to make sure you're in active relationship with the spirits of place, taking care of them, listening to them, watching the cycles of the particular land you're on, honoring the people who have cared for and stewarded this land long before you got there, the human people, right? Acknowledging them and honoring them and their descendants. That's also a very important part of this work. So another angle to this is the corporeal beings of place, who I very much consider to be spirits of place. So the animals and the insects, that we have to acknowledge that human exceptionalism is a supremacy lie that needs to be destroyed. We are raised and entrained into this idea that the human animal has some greater right over space, greater right over access than other beings, that we are somehow have dominion over the animals. I wonder where we got that idea. Dominion over the land, dominion over nature, and that sort of what we need comes first. What we want to do is more important than what anybody else wants to do. And the unfortunate thing is that cultivation of a human supremacy allows space for there to be other supremacies within the human supremacy model, right? Which there are an infinite number of them. So we have to do our best to ensure that when we are occupying a space, that the animals and the insects who also share that space with us are well taken care of to the best of our ability, that we're not doing things that cause them harm, that we're not creating situations that make it unsafe for them to live or make it difficult for them to live, that we're not cutting down the trees they call home for purely aesthetic reasons. Now, if a tree is diseased or at risk of falling, for some reason, then that's a different story, a different discussion. But when trees are the home to birds, the ancestral home to certain birds that return to that same nest, that same tree, when they take care of insects and squirrels and all of that, and we root that tree because it's in the way, this is problematic. And this is where we see a breaking of an unspoken contract. And when we see folks, when I see folks who come to me and say, I'm a good person, I don't go out of my way to hurt anybody, I'm not, doing anything horrible against people, but all of this bad stuff keeps happening to me. That's the first direction I go, is what's your behavior like to non-human people? And oftentimes we find people doing things that they have no real awareness is breaking an unspoken contract. We find somebody's luck turn for the worst after rooting a tree or pulling out a hedgerow because they have been conditioned to believe they can do whatever they want. We all have that, right? For at least most of us here in the States. So we're not the only ones occupying a space, and we're not the most important. Our narrative is not superior, and our power and our ability to manipulate space and manipulate matter does not give us dominion. What it does give us is an added responsibility to be caretakers. We have the ability to defend, protect, cultivate, nourish, support in ways that many of the other spirits of place don't have. We have a superpower, and we call it virtue. And so when this virtue of 5 fingers, one of them being an opposable thumb, and a brain with 2 hemispheres, and community and problem solving and resources, when we put all of that in service of otherness, in service of the others who share space with us, then we find, as a side effect, real luck manifests, right? But we also find that we become initiated deeper and deeper and deeper into part ofness, right? Feeling like we have a responsibility and we have kinship with the spirits of place. The practice, the work begins with alienation, right? We feel like we're doing it for someone else. We're doing it because someone needs it. We're doing it to placate. So at first it's like a separation. And then in time, we get the initiations. And what happens is we feel like we're doing it for ourselves. We feel like every time we don't get in the way, every time we preserve a tree, every time we consider the many non-human people who use a space or travel through a space or call a space home, it actually just starts to feel really personal. And that's really important. I think the ideal, the goal here should be to take all of this work personally, that caring for our neighbors, human and otherwise, is caring for ourselves, right? That we are all gathered around the same campfire, and that because we're gathered around the same campfire, whether by choice or by providence or by this is where you were born or this is where you landed, you are actively engaged in a contract with space and with the persons of that space. We have a practice in the green art that I teach of kindling a fire, either in the form of an actual fire or a candle, right? Where that represents kind of wherever that light reaches, it represents the space which you are now responsible for the duration of your ritual, for the duration of your working. That when you light that fire, you are taking stewardship of the space. You are asking the spirits of place to support your work, and you're saying that you will leave the space better than you found it, or at least, as good as you found it, and that while you're there, you're asking that your presence be welcome and supported, and that that there be camaraderie between you and all those who live there. And it changes the ritual. It changes the experience in a way that goes beyond other magical or sorcerous or ritual or ceremonial things that we do to sort of craft sacred space. So I like to keep that visualization in my mind, that idea that we are all sort of gathered around these individual fires, and our fires reach out in a certain way to cover certain areas, certain geographical areas, our neighborhood, our place of work, where we live, where we hang out. And all of the people who are in that sphere are our responsibility. It's a really interesting way to think about how to think locally and act locally, and how to create powerful change and to nourish equity by putting your power, putting your virtue, your vital force into action in the places where you have the most influence, right? And we have the most influence in the reach of our own campfires, in the places where we hang out every day, the places where we go, the spaces where we are a spirit of place. So hopefully that's inspiring. There's so much more that we could cover on this topic, and we will definitely circle back around at some point and do a little part 2 on this class. But my invitation for now is to go out, try to acknowledge and experience the presence of otherness in the places where you haunt, the places you travel, the places you live and work, and to enter into right relationship with all of them.